Melissa Lucio was sentenced to death for the murder of her 2-year-old daughter, although it's entirely possible that this woman did not commit such a crime. Meanwhile, Emilia Carr will live, as her death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Today, I will tell you the stories of women who have been sentenced to death. And at the end of the video, you will learn the most frightening and unjust story of all that will be discussed today. Enjoy watching.
I have a very strange question for you.
Could you spend 22 years in a small room with only a bed, a toilet, and a sink, without interacting with anyone at all? Oh, I forgot to mention, you are not allowed to have any belongings, including books and even photographs.
Personally, I think it would be unbearable even for a week.
But Linda Carti has been there since early 2002. Terrifying, isn't it? But why did she end up in such a dreadful situation? It's all because of her involvement in a crime. According to the prosecution, Linda was involved in a very strange and horrific incident that occurred in Texas. 3 unknown individuals broke into the home of a young family who had just had a baby. They assaulted the parents and then took the mother and her child. Later, the woman was found dead in the trunk of Linda Carti's car. Fortunately, the child was unharmed. Upon searching Linda's living quarters, the police found various items for taking care of infants: diapers, baby food, and much more. There was no doubt she orchestrated the abduction. But killing the mother was not part of the plan. It later turned out that the woman simply suffocated in the trunk after lying there for 8 hours under the blazing sun. In February 2002, Linda was found guilty of organizing this terrible crime, and she was sentenced to death. However, not everything was as straightforward as it might seem.
Personally, I believe Linda Carti is not guilty of this crime. And here's why.
The thing is, from the very first interviews, the woman denied her involvement in this incident. And her arguments, I must say, sounded quite logical. She said that if she wanted to have a child, she would have done so, and kidnapping a newborn infant made no sense to her. Furthermore, there was another strange inconsistency. The fact is that all the witnesses during police questioning initially gave completely different testimonies. But in court, they said things that were convenient for the prosecution, and even omitted some details. The woman's lawyer pointed this out in court by providing a recording of that interrogation. However, the court did not accept this evidence. Why not? One can also logically answer this question. The thing is, at the time the crime was committed, there were elections in the state. And to gain power, a candidate must vigorously fight crime without showing any weakness. This position is expressed by both the lawyer and Linda herself, and even her relatives. However, all appeals in this case are rejected. So, for 22 years now, the woman has been living in the death row cell in one of the US prisons.
And personally, I am amazed at how she has not gone insane there yet.
What do you think? Is Linda guilty of this crime?
Another unjust story where a woman was sentenced to death.
But the worst part, in my opinion, is that even her own mother turned away from Shawna Ford. Only her daughter, who was 17 at the time of the sentencing, continues to write letters. But what did this woman do? And why do I call this story unjust?
I'll tell you everything now.
In Arizona, not far from the border with Mexico, something terrible happened. Generally, the locals in this area do everything to prevent illegal migrants from entering America. And so, one of the armed groups operating in this area committed a heinous crime. They attacked a Mexican family, and during the investigation of this incident, the police traced it back to Shawna Ford. She was accused of organizing this crime. The investigation believes that she directed the bandits to the home of a very ordinary family, stating that they were involved in the production and distribution of drugs. And all the local residents strongly opposed this menace. During the attack, a 9-year-old girl and her father were killed. The criminals shot them in the head. But the child's mother survived. She was shot in the leg. On that fateful night, she managed to call the police and provide them with important information. According to the woman, there were 4 or more attackers. Among them was a short woman with chestnut hair. And this description matched Shawna Ford, who was known for her opposition to migrants. And this information is clearly heard during the call of the victim to the police, the recording of which, fortunately, was preserved.
911, where's your emergency?
Ma'am, somebody just came in and shot my daughter and my husband.
They shot them? And where were they shot?
In the head. In the head.
Are they still there, the people who are there that shot them?
They're coming back in. They're coming back in. Get the fuck out of here. Let me know.
Are you okay? How many people were there?
I don't know, ma'am.
And did it sound like males were talking?
There was a male and there was a shorter, fat woman.
Okay, now the woman, what did she look like? Was she a Hispanic female?
No, she was a white, short woman.
Okay.
During the investigation of this case, many terrifying secrets were uncovered.
And once again, this is a case where I can say that the woman sentenced to death may be innocent.
The thing is, after the attack near that house, a Magnum revolver was found, presumably used to shoot the Mexican family. Later, photos of a naked woman holding the same gun were found on one of the killer's phones. But it wasn't Shawna Ford. The defendant's lawyer believed that she literally wasn't at the crime scene at that time, and this whole case was fabricated based on just one witness's testimony, who couldn't even identify the woman as the killer. In any case, appeals in this case continue to be rejected. So the question remains, who is actually guilty of these terrible murders? Shawna Ford herself believes that all this is happening because of America's terrible judicial system. After all, death penalty cases are almost never reviewed. So even if someone decided to frame this poor woman, they will never be punished.
I'm amazed by the terrible statistics regarding the death penalty in America.
Only 6 women have avoided punishment since 1976. And I also found information that most death sentences for women were carried out by lethal injection. By the way, the previous 2 women were also sentenced to death this way.
It's frightening, isn't it?
Moreover, most of these women came from very poor families. That's exactly how Melissa Lucio lived. This woman used drugs and led a less than ideal life. And she had 13 children and a very close-knit family. And she was sentenced to death. It's sad, isn't it? But for what reason such a severe punishment? The police believe that Melissa abused her little 2-year-old daughter, causing her death. On February 17, 2007, a terrible call came to the hospital. The little girl was unconscious, unresponsive, and not breathing. In principle, such a severe sentence could have been justified if there were no problems in this case. The main question that the investigator faced was whether the girl died because of her mother's abuse. And police decided that it was, because they found narcotics in the woman's tests.
In this story, it is important to consider the fact that Melissa's family was very close-knit.
The children simply adored their mother, and she adored her children. Yes, the mother had flaws, and she acknowledges them, but she never wished harm to her daughter, and this fact is confirmed by other children, and even Melissa's sister.
This whole case turned out to be extremely unjust.
The thing is, a few days before the girl's death, the large family was moving from one residence to another. And according to the deceased girl's siblings, she fell from a staircase and hit her head that day. The defense believes that this could have been the cause of death. This raises the question, why didn't the mother seek help at the hospital then? And I remind you that Melissa's family was very poor, and a simple visit to the doctor could have been a big financial problem for her. Unfortunately, the court refuses to take this fact into account, and all of the woman's appeals have been rejected. Only an attempt to appeal to the Supreme Court was successful, but the interview with Melissa, which I found for you, was recorded before this moment. It's a heart-wrenching sight.
On death row, I've been here going on 9 years. On August 12th will be 9 years.
Did you ever think that something like this would happen to you?
Oh, no.
Do you feel that you stood a chance when the trial happened?
Oh, no. I have one appeal left, so that means my last appeal will go into the U.S. Supreme Court. So that'll be my last resort. And if I get denied there, then I get an execution date.
Are you scared?
I wouldn't say I'm scared. I just feel for my children. not being able to say goodbye to them if this does happen.
Unfortunately, not all women sentenced to death are innocent.
I found a very scary and shocking story of Kerri Lynn Dalton, and there is no doubt that this person is guilty of the crime. The woman is accused of murdering and torturing a person. She, along with her accomplices, 3 other men, killed a woman, and they did it horribly. At the crime scene, evidence pointing to what happened was found. They found a cast iron skillet, a knife, and a syringe filled with battery acid. A witness who suspected foul play, when he came to the house, found a scalp with hair on the ground. Apparently, the criminals first tormented the victim, removed her scalp, and then killed her. And they did it in a terrifying way. They injected her with a syringe containing battery acid. All the participants in that horror were found. The men claimed that it was Kerri Lynn Dalton who pushed them to take such a step. The criminals started cooperating with law enforcement, which allowed them to avoid the death penalty. But Dalton was sentenced to death. And the scariest part is that even now, 29 years later, the sentence has not been carried out, even though the woman confessed to her guilt.
Overall, our world is very unfair. After all, someone can be convicted of a crime they didn't commit.
Or even sentenced to death for the death of a child, which most likely occurred due to an accident. And someone simply took a life, killed a person, and remained alive because their death sentence was overturned. And I'm talking about Emilia Carr now. The main thing is not to confuse her with the famous actress Emilia Clarke. Their names are very similar after all. So Emilia lived in a poor family and she was constantly bullied in her childhood. All this could have led to some psychological deviations, and they in turn contributed to committing a crime. Emilia fell in love with a man named Joshua. He in turn was married to Heather Strong. In general, a love triangle formed. Heather was a great girl who endured her lover's abuses. According to the family's assurances, Joshua often bat his wife and even abused her.
At one point, Heather Strong disappeared, and only a few days later, after she was reported missing, she was found murdered.
The forensic examination showed that the death was quite horrific, and the investigation indicated that Emilia committed this murder. As it turned out, the woman lured Heather Strong to a remote location by deceit. There, she attempted to strangle the girl with a plastic bag and break her neck to make her die quickly. But she failed to do so, so Emilia tied her to a computer chair. As a result, Heather Strong died from asphyxiation. Horrible, isn't it?
But the scariest part, in my opinion,
was what happened next. Emilia's defense claimed that the person who persuaded her to commit such a crime was the same guy she fell in love with, Joshua. And, as it turned out, this was partly true. They both planned to kill Heather Strong and then flee and live together.
Why they needed to kill someone for that, I honestly don't understand.
And also, Emilia was pregnant at the time of the crime, and 2 months after she was imprisoned, she gave birth to a child. By the way, it was indeed Joshua's child. A terrible fate for the poor baby. After all, he will definitely grow up without a mother and father.
Why am I so sure of this?
Because in court, they already handed down a sentence to them. Joshua was found guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. But Emilia faced a much worse fate. As you may have guessed, she was sentenced to death by injection.
But why did I talk about injustice at the very beginning of this story?
The thing is, later, thanks to appeals, Emilia Carr's punishment was changed. It was simply replaced with a life sentence.
Personally, I believe that this is an extremely unfair case.
Just remember the previous cases with Carti, Shawna Ford, or Melissa Lucio. All these women are still in the death row, although they may not have committed these crimes at all. I feel most sorry for Melissa. She's that drug addict with 13 children. And yes, her death sentence has not been lifted yet, and she's still under investigation. But the killer, who 100% took someone's life, will live.
What do you think? Are the women I told you about today guilty?
Write in the comments.
Today, I told you remarkable stories from the lives of women who were sentenced to death.
Some of them are probably innocent, while others committed bloody murders like real professionals. And you know where else we need professionals? In our team! Friends, you have the opportunity to join our team. If you have skills in video editing, can voice over videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we will be glad to work with you. Write to the Telegram bot, link in the description. And thank you for watching!